Welcome to the Mixed Race Belonging Podcast, where we explore the intersection of mixed identity and belonging through the lens of somatics and personal and collective liberation to help you heal your belonging wounds and build relationships where you can show up as your full-ass self. I'm your host, Raina LaGrand, an embodiment coach for mixed race people with a background as a trauma therapist, yoga teacher, and health educator. The tools and insights I share with you here are the approach that has not only helped me heal my belonging wound, but also helped me help my mixed race clients do the same. We all need something good to belong to right now. Relationships and spaces where we feel safe, held, seen, heard, and dignified. Thanks for being here, and let's get started with today's show. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about the number one skill that you need to build relationships where you can show up as your whole self. And this is a deeper dive into really like one of the pillars that I talked about last week in the podcast, the different pillars of my work. And that is attunement. And actually, like even within attunement, it's the ability to witness your experience, what a teacher of mine calls witnessing mind, and is also sometimes called dual awareness in the trauma therapy world. So let's talk about this. What is attunement and the witnessing mind? So attunement is the process of really getting our inner experience, right? Really seeing it and understanding it. And that starts with actually the witnessing mind skill. So think of the witnessing mind as your ability to metaphorically kind of step back and notice your experience. Because here's the thing. When we are triggered, when we are overwhelmed, when we live with a lot of trauma, it is really common to just be wrapped up in our experience and often like feel like we are drowning in it or trapped in our body, or that our emotions constantly are hijacking our experience. And especially when it comes to our wounding through relationships, it is really common that we will hold core beliefs about ourselves that are really rigid and feel so true that we cannot imagine it a different way. So when we can have that witnessing mind ability, like capacity, we can step back and become a little bit more objective and compassionate observer about our experience. And actually, there is neuroscience around this compassion piece. As we start to step back, there are chemicals released in our brain that help us to slow down, in contrast to sort of the speediness of feeling triggered and like the being kind of like on a hamster wheel. So it helps us to slow down, and it helps us to access compassion. And then having that compassion actually releases even more GABA in the subcortical part of our brains. It's an inhibitory transmitter. And this actually helps our brains to be in a state that promotes healing and integration, right? Versus being wrapped up in that sort of like trauma state, which there is no shame around. That is your body's way, your brain's way of trying to help you to stay safe, to be on guard for the tiger. But when we choose to heal, when we seek support for healing, getting this witnessing mind capacity can be really transformative. And how I use it in my work with clients is noticing what is happening in your body, noticing what you're feeling, right? And so many of my clients will say that there is more space between what they are feeling and how they are reacting, or even that they'll notice like, wow, I've just been scrolling on TikTok for an hour. There's more space, and they're actually noticing more quickly, oh, I'm in sort of like a disconnected, dissociated space, and I can actually change that. And we can use this witnessing capacity to notice what we are doing in our relationships. If we are shrinking ourselves, or if we are setting boundaries from a place of feeling unsafe when we actually are safe, right? So, as we develop this witnessing mind capacity, it becomes easier to stop the process of dissociating, the process of ruminating, the process of reacting reflexively. We can slow down and step back, and we can start to get curious about our experience. We can be gentle and compassionate with ourselves. What exactly are we witnessing? What are we noticing? Well, I think of it this way, there are different layers to our present moment experience. There are thoughts, what we're thinking about, our beliefs, different questions we have. There are emotions, anger, sadness, joy, fear, so on. There's five sense information, such as what's actually happening in our environment, what we can smell, taste, touch, hear, or see, and as well as what kind of maybe images or things are popping up in our memory. That's also five sense information. We can also notice different behavioral patterns that include subtle movements and impulses, as well as more explicit behavior patterns. So a good example of either of these is impulses might kind of be like you're at a haunted house and someone jumps out at you and you like pull away, right? Versus something that's more conscious, such as reaching for a snack potentially, which also could maybe be unconscious, but that's another conversation for another day. So noticing thoughts, emotions, five sense information, behaviors, as well as sensations, what you're feeling in your body, temperature, constriction, tension, whether something feels pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. We can be noticing our appetite for connection, whether we want to be connecting with people or not. Our appetite for movement, whether we want to be moving around or we're wanting to be still. So a common exercise that I do with clients to explore and flesh out these different layers of the present moment is to draw an outline of a body, kind of like a gingerbread cookie, and then use different colors, shapes, textures, words to capture what you're feeling inside your body. And this has been such a helpful tool for so many of my clients. We do it at the end of almost every belonging building block session, as well as during many coaching sessions. And I know that this is a tool that folks have taken with them and used like outside of our work too, to be like, what the heck am I feeling? Like, let me kind of drop in and notice. Doing this drawing work also is a way for our implicit brain, our implicit consciousness to come forward if we are having trouble finding the words. Like the explicit knowing of it might be kind of elusive, but using drawing engages a different part of our brain. So that can be really helpful if you're like, I don't know what I'm feeling. Draw that gingerbread cookie outline and just like get some crayons, some colored pencils, and just like see what happens. So and this witnessing mind, this is a skill that we can build over time, right? So I just want to normalize if you're like, I don't even know where to start, or wow, I can't do that at all. You have to exercise the muscle in order for the skill to grow. This is something I've been working on for about 10 years. And I can confidently say has like grown in me. And one of the benefits, there are many benefits to having this witnessing mind capacity. I said earlier, like it puts our brain in a state that will help us like heal and integrate. Like neurobiologically, we're more likely to actually change and grow and heal when we have this ability to witness our experience rather than drowning in it. And that, both happens inside our sessions, but also outside of our sessions, to be able to put ourselves in new relationship experiences, to take risks, and to tolerate the not knowing. When we have more witnessing capacity, we can tolerate discomfort more. So I'm thinking of something that happened for me recently. I joined this all Black women's collage course. And on the first day, we were introducing ourselves, and it was actually a client of mine who recommended this course to me. And so I said, "Oh, I'm a coach for mixed race people, and one of my clients recommended this course." And I had signed up for the course with no, not batting an eye. I was like, "Yes, I want to do this." But when I said to everyone in the group, it was a Zoom room. So this beautiful collage of beautiful Black women looking back at me. I said, I'm a coach for mixed race people, but essentially outing myself as a mixed person, even though clearly I'm light skinned and looked pretty darn mixed. I noticed my body went, I kind of felt tense inside, and my stomach kind of turned over. And I could imagine in the past, I would have totally spiraled into, I shouldn't have said that. What will they think? Now they're going to think that I'm too white for this space, or that I don't see myself as Black. I would have gone into a total spiral. But I noticed that very natural, normal reaction in my body. And I actually was able to pause, feel the ground in the chair underneath me, and tolerate not knowing what would happen next. And you know what happened next? Nothing. In fact, they have been nothing but kind and welcoming of me. And in fact, the facilitator actually reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in organizing a little Halloween party for those of us who are located in Southeast Michigan and Metro Detroit. Because we did another icebreaker where we were talking about holidays and parties and stuff. And it's about to be Halloween. So I have been nothing but accepted in that space, right? So my witnessing mind ability, my ability to attune to my experience and be with my experience, helped me to continue being in that space and getting to really enjoy it. Another way that this witnessing mind capacity can be helpful is it can help you be more attuned to your needs. So one of the questions I pose a lot, or prompts that I pose a lot to my clients, is how can you make yourself 1% more comfortable? As we're settling into a space, or as you're doing something out in the world that feels a little risky and is bringing up some anxiety, how can you make yourself a little more comfortable? Because when we're in that space where we're not noticing our experience, we will often stay in either body positions potentially that aren't comfortable, or we won't think about different tools that we can reach for that might help us feel more comfortable. We're not so mindful about what is going to help me feel comfy and feel resilient to do something, right? So that question really, I think, lands quite powerfully with folks. How can I make myself feel 1% more comfortable? So you can become more able to notice and respond to your needs, as well as grief. I talked a lot about grief in the last podcast episode, and I'll do more podcast episodes on grief. But witnessing is a way where we can step back and get curious about what's underneath some of our emotions that are at the forefront. So I think I notice a lot that shame and insecurity are often at the forefront of folks' emotional landscape, but underneath that is actually grief. The shame is a way that we sort of protect ourselves from feeling the bigness of the grief of the belonging wound and what has been lost or missing in our relationships. And as we develop more witnessing capacity, we can settle into the grief without feeling like we have to run away from it or even do something about it. There's just so much more I could say about grief. I think that life is full of grief, and healing is actually opening up to grief. It's really opening up to our reality and the context that we live in. So the witnessing mind can help you to be with that grief and to get curious about what supports you in that grief process. This reminds me of a friend of mine who's a grief worker. And she talks about from one of her teachers, she learned, grief is like a river, like it's always running through us. And our job is not to actually do something with our grief, but to kind of be the river banks, to be offered guardrails that hold our grief so that it can do what it does. Like grief knows what to do. It knows how to process, it knows how to metabolize if we can actually give it the space and the permission to do so. So, yeah, the witnessing mind can really help us be with our grief. Witnessing mind can also help us sort of along the lines of that 1% more comfortable in what our needs are. Just want to expand on that piece a bit to discern what actually feels good. What actually feels good in our relationships? Which relationships actually feel good to us? I definitely had some relationships earlier in my life with people because it allowed me a certain proximity to Blackness. That felt really important to me at the time and still is important to me. And I love my Black friends. But there were some folks that I was friends with because it helped me feel more Black, not because I actually got a lot out of those friendships. Yeah. And noticing what relationships actually felt good to me, it's sort of like that when one door closes, another one opens. Being more and more open and honest with myself and attuned to what feels good has led me to relationships with people of all racial identities, including Black folks, that feel really good and nourishing and supportive of me. Attuning to what felt good in my body has also been really interesting, where it overlaps with other things that I reach for when connection doesn't feel like it's as available. So food is something that I will often reach for when I feel unsatisfied or unconnected. And of course, like sometimes I reach for food and it is so satisfying. It is so fulfilling. And sometimes I reach for it and actually it feels good temporarily, but it's not like a sustainable source of pleasure. And I worked with a coach on this, actually, an intuitive eating coach, on actually noticing when I was reaching more for food from an emotional place. And that actually said something about how I was feeling dissatisfied in other areas of my life, which then led me into grief around what wasn't in my life, and also led me into like starting to get creative and explorative and playful and take risks to actually create relationships and things in my life that did feel fulfilling and satisfying. So, this witnessing mind skill is really like a cascade into so many other things, and is, one of the primary things that I work with clients. Like no matter what we're doing, whatever pillar we're in, whether it's relational skill building, embracing multiplicity, grief tending, I will often ask questions that draw you back into that witnessing space of noticing what's happening for you as you talk about this, or noticing how you're feeling towards this part of you who engages in this sort of repetitive relational behavior. And this witnessing mind capacity is something that is, I think, really different from maybe traditional talk therapies, in that once you develop this skill and you keep nurturing it, you take this with you forever. And, like in a way, I want to work myself out of a job. I want you to not need me in the same way. We can be homies, but I want you to learn to trust yourself to deal with things as they come up. And so witnessing mind will help you to be developing the trust of, I can step back, I can pause, I can notice, I can get curious, and I can make a conscious, informed, intuitive, intentional decision about how I want to move forward. So I hope this was helpful and gives you even more insight into what sessions with me look like. If this witnessing mind skill feels like something you'd like to further develop, if you feel like you're always kind of in a ping-ponging sort of reflexive place, or that there are really rigid core beliefs you hold about yourself that feel so true that like you don't belong, or that you're not allowed to like own certain parts of your ancestry, or that you're a burden, working with me and developing more capacity for witnessing mine is going to help you. So don't hesitate to book a sales call. It's free. We can talk about what you're struggling with. I can really show you some examples, very custom to your experience, around what coaching, working together would look like. And I just absolutely love to talk with you and learn more about you. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.